Standing in my family living room, watching my 24-year-old brother Marcus clutch a $15,000 airline ticket to Switzerland, I could not believe what I was seeing. In my own hands sat a plain white ceramic mug with generic "Congratulations, graduate" text printed across the front. My parents, Linda and Robert, beamed at Marcus like he had just won the lottery, their faces glowing with pride and excitement. Meanwhile, I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. How did it come to this? Before I tell you this story, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe because trust me, you will not believe what happened next. This journey taught me something I never expected about family worth and standing up for yourself. Growing up in the suburbs of Denver, Colorado, I always knew something felt different about how my parents treated Marcus compared to me. Our two-story house on Maple Street looked picture-perfect from the outside, but inside the dynamics told a completely different story. Marcus was born 3 years after me, but from the moment he could walk, he became the center of our family universe. While I was expected to keep my room spotless and help with household chores, Marcus lived in what could only be described as a wonderland. His bedroom overflowed with the latest video games, art supplies, books, and whatever new hobby caught his interest that week. My room, in contrast, held basic furniture and a few carefully chosen decorations I had saved up to buy with my babysitting money. The pattern started early and never stopped. When Marcus was 7, he kicked a soccer ball through our neighbor Mrs. Patterson's kitchen window. Instead of making him apologize or work to pay for the damage, my parents rushed over with flowers and a check explaining to Mrs. Patterson how sorry they were that their energetic son had made a mistake. They spent the entire evening telling Marcus it was okay, accidents happen, and he should not feel bad. 6 months later, I forgot to return a library book on time and owed $3 in late fees. The lecture I received about responsibility, taking care of other people's property, and disappointing the family lasted for over an hour. I had to pay the fine with my own allowance money and write a letter of apology to the librarian. These double standards became so normal that I stopped questioning them. I just accepted that Marcus was special, and I was the responsible one who needed to set a good example. My parents enrolled him in piano lessons, tennis camp, and art classes. When I asked if I could take dance lessons, they said we needed to save money for Marcus's activities since he showed real talent. By high school, the differences became even more pronounced. Marcus struggled academically, bringing home C's and D's, but my parents hired expensive tutors and blamed his teachers for not understanding his creative learning style. When I brought home straight A's, the response was usually a quick, "good job," before the conversation shifted back to whatever Marcus was dealing with. I threw myself into my studies, determined to prove my worth through academic excellence. I joined the debate team, volunteered at the local animal shelter, and maintained a 4.0 GPA throughout high school. Deep down, I hoped that my achievements would finally earn me the recognition and attention I craved from my parents. College application season arrived, and the disparities became impossible to ignore. Marcus decided he wanted to study art history at Whitmore Academy, an expensive private college in Vermont, with a tuition price tag of $55,000 per year. Without hesitation, my parents began the financial planning to make his dream happen. They refinanced the house, adjusted their retirement contributions, and even asked my grandparents for financial assistance. When I announced my acceptance to the University of Colorado with a partial academic scholarship, my parents seemed relieved that I had chosen the practical option. They made it clear that while they supported my decision, I would need to cover the remaining expenses through student loans and part-time work. I qualified for several merit-based scholarships, but the gaps in funding meant I would graduate with significant debt. My college years became a blur of early morning shifts at campus grind, coffee shop afternoon classes, and late-night study sessions fueled by instant ramen and determination. I worked 25 hours per week while maintaining a full course load, often falling asleep over textbooks in the library. My hands stayed permanently stained with coffee grounds, and my social life consisted mainly of study groups and brief conversations with coworkers during shift changes. Meanwhile, Marcus's college experience looked like something from a movie. His Instagram posts showed fraternity parties, spring break trips to Cabo, and weekend visits home where my parents treated him like a returning celebrity. Every phone call home included updates about Marcus's latest artistic project or social event, while my academic achievements barely registered as conversation topics. During my junior year, I made the Dean's List 3 semesters in a row and was invited to join the Honor Society. When I called home to share the news, my mother listened politely before immediately changing the subject to Marcus's upcoming art exhibition at his college. The exhibition, which featured his pottery work, was described as groundbreaking and showing real promise for his future career. I began counting down to graduation, fantasizing about the moment when my 4 years of sacrifice and hard work would finally be recognized. I imagined my parents realizing how wrong they had been about their treatment of me. Maybe they would surprise me with something meaningful to acknowledge everything I had accomplished on my own. Senior year flew by in a whirlwind of job applications, final projects, and thesis writing. I secured a position at a marketing firm in downtown Denver starting 2 weeks after graduation. My grade point average ended at 3.9, and I qualified for summa cum laude honors. The graduation announcement I sent to my parents included all these details, hoping they would understand the magnitude of my achievements. Marcus was also graduating that spring, though his academic journey had been significantly more turbulent. His parents never mentioned his exact GPA, but based on overheard phone conversations, it seemed he was barely meeting the minimum requirements to graduate. Still, they spoke about his upcoming graduation with the same enthusiasm they had always shown for his endeavors. I spent weeks preparing for graduation day, choosing the perfect dress, researching restaurants where we might celebrate, and daydreaming about potential graduation gifts. I browsed jewelry stores online, imagining a necklace or bracelet that would symbolize this milestone achievement. I even looked at laptops, thinking my parents might surprise me with something practical for my new job. The morning of my graduation dawned bright and clear with the kind of perfect Colorado weather that makes everything feel possible. I put on my cap and gown with trembling hands, overwhelmed by the emotions of finally reaching this moment. 4 years of struggle, sacrifice, and determination had led to this day. My parents arrived at the ceremony looking slightly distracted, constantly checking their phones and whispering to each other. I tried to ignore the nagging feeling that something was wrong, focusing instead on the joy of walking across that stage to receive my diploma. When my name was called for summa cum laude recognition, I searched the crowd for my parents' faces and found them applauding, though they seemed somewhat distant. After the ceremony, we drove to Olive Garden for what I had hoped would be a celebratory lunch. The restaurant choice felt underwhelming compared to the fancy steakhouse where we had celebrated Marcus's high school graduation, but I pushed down my disappointment and tried to enjoy the moment. Throughout lunch, my parents seemed preoccupied and kept exchanging meaningful glances. Finally, my father cleared his throat and announced that they had planned a special surprise celebration at home for both Marcus and me. My heart leaped with excitement, thinking this meant they had prepared something meaningful to honor our graduations together. Driving home from the restaurant, anticipation buzzed through my entire body. I tried to guess what kind of surprise awaited us, running through possibilities in my mind. Maybe they had invited extended family over for a party. Perhaps they had prepared a special dinner with both of our favorite foods. The mysterious way they had been acting all day suggested something significant was planned. Walking into our living room, I immediately noticed 2 wrapped packages sitting on the coffee table. One was enormous, clearly containing something substantial, while the other appeared small and lightweight. My stomach started to churn with an uncomfortable feeling I could not quite identify. My parents called Marcus over first, their faces lighting up with barely contained excitement. They handed him the larger package, and I watched as he tore away the wrapping paper to reveal an elaborate travel portfolio. Inside were business-class airline tickets to Zurich, a 2-week itinerary through Switzerland and northern Italy, reservations at 4-star hotels, and a credit card for expenses. Marcus started screaming with joy, jumping up and down like a little kid on Christmas morning. My parents rushed to embrace him, all 3 of them laughing and crying simultaneously. My father explained that this was their graduation gift to recognize Marcus's creative spirit and incredible potential in the art world. They described how the trip would inspire his future career and provide cultural experiences that would shape his artistic vision. The celebration continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Marcus called his friends to share the news while my parents discussed the itinerary details, pointing out famous museums and galleries he would visit. Everyone seemed to have forgotten I was standing there holding my breath and waiting for my turn. Finally, my mother turned to me with a bright smile and handed me the smaller package. My hands shook as I unwrapped it, revealing a plain white ceramic mug with "Congratulations, Graduate" printed in simple black text. The kind of generic gift you might find in the clearance section of any department store. Time seemed to stop completely. I stared at the mug, turning it over in my hands, searching for some additional meaning or hidden surprise. Maybe there was something inside it. Maybe this was just the first part of a larger gift. But no, this was it. This ordinary impersonal mug was their acknowledgement of 4 years of academic excellence and personal sacrifice. My father broke the silence by explaining their reasoning. "You are so practical, Autumn. We knew you would appreciate something useful that you can take to your new job. Marcus has been under so much stress with his studies, and he really deserves a chance to relax and explore the world." My mother nodded enthusiastically, adding that fancy trips were not really my style anyway. She reminded me how I had always been the sensible, responsible child who did not need expensive gestures to feel valued. They seemed genuinely convinced that they had chosen the perfect gift for each of us. I tried to process their logic, but nothing made sense. How was a $15,000 luxury vacation appropriate for someone who barely graduated, while a $5 mug was suitable for someone who achieved academic honors? I wanted to scream, to throw the mug across the room, to demand they explain this massive disparity in treatment. Instead, I managed to mumble a quiet "thank you" and excused myself to my room. Marcus looked embarrassed, but said nothing in my defense. My parents seemed oblivious to my emotional state, already deep in conversation about packing lists and travel insurance for Marcus's trip. Alone in my bedroom, I finally allowed myself to cry. 4 years of working multiple jobs, studying until 3 in the morning, and sacrificing every social opportunity had led to this moment of complete dismissal. The mug sat on my desk, mocking everything I had accomplished. I called my best friend Sarah, trying to explain what had just happened. Even as I spoke the words aloud, the situation seemed too absurd to be real. Sarah was outraged on my behalf, but her anger somehow made me feel even worse. If someone outside our family could immediately see how wrong this was, why could my own parents not understand? That night, I lay in bed replaying every moment of favoritism I had endured throughout my life. The expensive gifts Marcus received while I made do with hand-me-downs. The elaborate birthday parties thrown for him while mine were small, family-only affairs. The constant excuses made for his failures while my successes went unacknowledged. For the first time, I seriously wondered if I was adopted. It would explain so much about why I felt like an outsider in my own family. Maybe my parents had taken me in out of obligation rather than love, and Marcus was their real child who deserved their attention and resources. 2 days after the graduation gift ceremony, I was putting away laundry when I overheard my parents talking on the phone in their bedroom. My mother's voice carried through the thin walls as she spoke to someone, probably my Aunt Karen, about the graduation gifts. "We really had to do something special for Marcus," she was saying. "His grades have been absolutely terrible, and we are worried about his future. We thought maybe a nice trip would help motivate him to figure out his life path." My father's voice joined the conversation. "The boy has been struggling so much. His professors say he barely shows up to class, and he failed 2 courses this semester. We are hoping this experience in Europe will give him some direction." I pressed my ear closer to the wall, my heart pounding as the truth became clear. This expensive graduation gift was not a reward for achievement. It was damage control for failure. My parents were essentially paying $15,000 to help Marcus avoid facing the consequences of his poor academic performance. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Not only had my genuine accomplishments been dismissed with a cheap mug, but Marcus's failures had been rewarded with the trip of a lifetime. The injustice was so profound that I felt nauseous. I spent the next week in a fog of disbelief and anger. Every interaction with my parents felt forced and artificial. When they asked about my new job or my plans for the future, their questions seemed hollow and perfunctory. Meanwhile, the excitement about Marcus's trip dominated every family conversation. Marcus himself seemed increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. I caught him looking at me with guilty expressions during family dinners, but he never found the courage to address what had happened. Part of me hoped he would speak up and acknowledge how unfair the whole situation was, but he remained silent. The travel planning consumed our household for weeks. My parents researched restaurants in Zurich, booked museum tours in Florence, and even arranged for Marcus to meet with gallery owners in several cities. The level of detail and care they put into his trip stood in stark contrast to their complete lack of interest in my career launch. I could not continue living with this injustice without taking action. The inequality had gone on for too long, and I refused to accept their explanation that this was simply how our family worked. Something needed to change, and I realized that change would have to start with me. My first step was gathering evidence. I began documenting every instance of preferential treatment. I could remember writing detailed accounts of the double standards that had defined our family dynamics for years. I researched the actual cost of Marcus's education compared to mine, calculating the financial investment my parents had made in each of us. The numbers were staggering, including tuition room and board study abroad programs and various activities. My parents had spent approximately $200,000 on Marcus's college experience. My education, even including the small amount they had contributed, had cost them less than $30,000 total. I also started investigating our family's financial situation more carefully. While organizing some paperwork for my father, I discovered documents showing that my parents had borrowed against their 401k retirement fund to pay for Marcus's Switzerland trip. They had literally taken money from their future to fund this extravagant vacation. Armed with this information, I decided to confront them directly. I waited until Marcus was out with friends and asked my parents to sit down for a serious conversation. I presented my findings calmly and rationally, explaining how the pattern of favoritism had affected me emotionally and financially throughout my life. Their reaction was not what I had hoped for. Instead of acknowledging the validity of my concerns, they became defensive and angry. My father accused me of being jealous and ungrateful, while my mother insisted that they had always treated both children fairly, according to their different needs and personalities. Marcus is going through a difficult time right now, my father explained. He needs extra support to find his direction in life. You have always been self-sufficient and successful. You do not need the same level of help. My mother nodded in agreement. You have always been so independent and capable, Autumn. Marcus is more sensitive and needs more guidance. We have to parent each child according to their individual requirements. I tried to explain that need-based parenting should not result in such dramatic disparities in treatment, but they refused to engage with my arguments. The conversation ended with harsh words and hurt feelings on all sides, leaving me more frustrated than ever. That evening, Marcus knocked on my bedroom door. He looked genuinely distressed as he sat down on my bed and finally spoke the words I had been waiting to hear for weeks. I know this is messed up, Autumn. I know you deserved better than that stupid mug. And I know I do not deserve this expensive trip. I have been feeling terrible about it since graduation day. Marcus went on to explain that he had been struggling with depression and anxiety throughout college, which explained his poor academic performance. He admitted that he had been afraid to tell our parents about his mental health issues because he did not want to disappoint them further. I tried to tell them I did not want the trip, he said, but they insisted it would be good for me. They said I needed something to look forward to, and that travel would help me gain perspective on my future. While I appreciated Marcus finally acknowledging the situation, I was still hurt by his silence during the gift ceremony and the weeks that followed. I told him that his guilt meant nothing if he was not willing to take action to address the unfairness. Marcus promised he would talk to our parents about the disparity in our treatment, but I had little faith that his intervention would make any difference. Our parents had spent years dismissing my concerns, and I doubted they would listen to Marcus's perspective any more seriously. I realized that if I wanted things to change, I would need to take more dramatic action. Simply talking to my parents had not worked, and waiting for Marcus to advocate for me was not a reliable strategy. I needed to force the issue in a way that could not be ignored or dismissed. After researching family therapy options in our area, I found Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a licensed counselor who specialized in family dynamics and sibling relationships. I scheduled an initial consultation to discuss the situation and get her professional opinion on how to proceed. Dr. Walsh listened to my story with genuine concern and validated my feelings about the unfair treatment I had experienced. She suggested organizing a structured family meeting where everyone could express their perspectives in a safe, mediated environment. I also decided to contact the financial advisor who had helped my parents plan for college expenses. I wanted to understand the long-term impact of their spending decisions and present concrete information about how their choices had affected our family's financial stability. My plan was ambitious but necessary. I would arrange a family intervention with Dr. Walsh present, armed with detailed financial information and documented examples of the preferential treatment Marcus had received throughout our lives. I would force my parents to confront the reality of their parenting choices and demand changes to ensure fair treatment going forward. The preparation took several weeks. I compiled photo evidence of birthday parties, Christmas morning gift distributions, and family vacations, where the disparities were clearly visible. I gathered financial documents showing the cost differences in our educations and the impact of their borrowing decisions on their retirement planning. Most importantly, I reached out to Marcus's academic advisor at his college to better understand his situation and explore alternatives to the expensive European vacation. I learned that the college offered counseling services, tutoring programs, and even gap year opportunities that could provide him with the support and direction he needed at a fraction of the cost of international travel. I spent hours practicing what I would say during the family meeting, anticipating their possible responses, and preparing counter-arguments for their typical justifications. I knew this confrontation would be difficult and potentially damaging to our family relationships, but I also knew that continuing to accept the status quo was not an option. The night before the scheduled meeting, I lay in bed feeling a mixture of anxiety and determination. Tomorrow would either mark the beginning of positive change in our family dynamics or potentially destroy the relationships I had been trying so hard to preserve. Either way, I would finally know where I stood. The family meeting took place on a Saturday morning in our living room with Dr. Walsh facilitating the discussion from the armchair where my father usually sat to watch television. I had arranged the furniture in a circle to encourage open communication, though the tension in the room was immediately apparent. My parents entered the room with skeptical expressions, clearly uncomfortable with having an outsider involved in what they considered private family matters. Marcus looked nervous but supportive, having agreed to participate after our previous conversation about the need for change. I began by presenting my documented evidence of preferential treatment using specific examples and financial data to illustrate the patterns that had developed over the years. Dr. Walsh guided the conversation, ensuring that everyone had opportunities to speak without interruption or defensiveness derailing the discussion. When I revealed the extent of the financial disparity between Marcus's education and mine, including the retirement fund borrowing for his Switzerland trip, my parents looked genuinely shocked. They had never calculated the total amounts or considered the long-term impact of their spending decisions. Marcus surprised everyone by speaking up strongly in support of my position. He acknowledged that the preferential treatment had been obvious throughout our childhood and admitted that he had often felt guilty about receiving advantages he had not earned. His willingness to validate my experiences seemed to have a significant impact on our parents. I do not want the expensive trip, if it means Autumn continues to feel like she does not matter to this family, Marcus said. Her accomplishments deserve recognition, and I think we all know that a coffee mug was completely inappropriate as a graduation gift. Dr. Walsh helped our parents understand how their well-intentioned efforts to support Marcus's struggles had inadvertently created a toxic dynamic that devalued my achievements and independence. She explained how need-based parenting could be fair and effective without creating such dramatic disparities in treatment. The breakthrough moment came when my mother finally acknowledged that their approach had been wrong. With tears in her eyes, she admitted that they had taken my strength and self-reliance for granted, assuming I did not need the same level of support and recognition as Marcus. "We thought you were so capable and independent that you did not need us to celebrate your success," she said. "But we realize now that everyone needs to feel valued and appreciated by their family, regardless of how successful they are on their own." My father was more resistant to admitting fault, but eventually conceded that the financial disparities had been unfair and unsustainable. The retirement fund borrowing in particular troubled him when Dr. Walsh explained the long-term consequences for their financial security. Together, we developed a plan to address the immediate situation and prevent similar problems in the future. The Switzerland trip would be canceled with the refunded money used to pay down family debt and create an equal opportunity fund that both Marcus and I could access for future endeavors. Marcus would receive appropriate support for his academic and mental health challenges through resources available at his college and in our community. I would receive a meaningful graduation gift that acknowledged my achievements and helped launch my career along with assistance in paying down my student loans. Most importantly, we established new family policies around gift-giving financial support and recognition to ensure that future treatment would be equitable rather than based on perceived need or favoritism. The conversation lasted nearly 4 hours and was emotionally exhausting for everyone involved. There were tears, arguments, and moments when I wondered if the relationships could be repaired. But by the end, I felt cautiously optimistic that real change was possible. Over the following months, our family attended regular therapy sessions to work on communication skills and address the underlying issues that had created our dysfunctional patterns. The process was not easy, and there were setbacks along the way, but gradually our relationships began to improve. Marcus started counseling for his anxiety, and depression joined a study group to improve his academic performance and found a part time job that gave him a sense of purpose and responsibility. He seemed to thrive with appropriate support rather than expensive band aid solutions. My parents followed through on their commitments, purchasing a quality laptop for my new job and contributing significantly to my student loan payments. More importantly, they began actively celebrating my achievements and including me equally in family decisions and conversations. The changes were not dramatic or immediate, but they were genuine and sustainable. Family dinners became more balanced with equal attention paid to both of our lives and accomplishments. Holiday and birthday celebrations followed agreed upon spending guidelines that ensured fairness. I learned valuable lessons about self advocacy and the importance of setting boundaries with family members. Sometimes you have to fight for fair treatment, even with people who love you because they may not recognize their own biases and patterns without direct confrontation. The experience also taught me that my worth as a person was not dependent on external validation, whether from family members or anyone else. While it felt wonderful to finally receive appropriate recognition for my achievements, I had already proven my capabilities and value through my own actions and decisions. Most importantly, I discovered that it was possible to maintain loving family relationships while still demanding respect and equality. Change required courage, preparation, and professional help, but it was achievable when everyone committed to the process. Today, my relationship with my parents is stronger than it has ever been, built on mutual respect and honest communication, rather than the old patterns of favoritism and resentment. Marcus and I have developed a genuine friendship based on shared experiences and understanding rather than competition and jealousy. Have you ever experienced favoritism in your family, and how did you handle it? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life experiences about standing up for yourself and creating healthy family dynamics. Share this video with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the importance of self-advocacy and setting boundaries with family members. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and I hope it inspires you to know your worth and fight for the respect you deserve. Remember, you have the power to change unhealthy patterns in your relationships, and you are worth the effort it takes to create positive change.